What's that you say, Viking duck? Well, that offends me. What's that? What's that? Oh, you're sorry that I'm offended, but you're still waiting for an argument. Hmm, I guess you have a point. Hello, this is Simple Life Philosophy, and I'm your host, Ed Raby. And this is a channel that looks at the development of a simple philosophy of life that is both easy to understand and easy to execute. Today we want to look at a little bit about being offended. A lot of Stoic philosophy, a lot of pagan philosophy talks about being offended. And there's a temptation, I suppose, when you consider the virtue of honor, whether something offends your honor, but I'm not really sure that that's a proper definition of honor if it can be offended. A true definition of honor goes a little bit deeper than the surface feelings of being offended or not offended. But when I hear somebody say, I'm offended, I become, well, interestingly aware of a few things now these days. It is easy, I think, for a lot of people to say they're offended. The quote that Viking Duck gave me comes from Christopher Hitchens, and back in the day when Christopher Hitchens would debate religious figures, he would encounter people that say, hey, well, don't you realize that what you're saying is offensive to me? And Christopher Hitchens would respond, well, I'm sorry you're offended, but I'm still waiting for your argument. What he's saying is you still haven't brought me to any kind of truth. Just because you have these feelings of offensiveness, being offended, doesn't change the fact that you still haven't really dealt with what the truth is or whether or not I'm right. Okay, so that's kind of the issue of being offended. I'm also going to look at another character that we often look at around here, which is Epictetus. Epictetus had a few things to say about being offended. When you are offended, he says, at any man's fault, turn to yourself and study your own failings. Then you will forget your anger. Another thing that Epictetus said about being offended, a person that is capable of angering you becomes your master. He can anger you only when you present yourself to be offended. Here's the thing about being offended. And I think both these quotes from Epictetus kind of lead us into a couple of conclusions about being offended that I definitely very much agree with. Number one, I think when you say you're offended, you're kind of being a little bit arrogant, and you're also forgetting the humanity of the person that is offending you. Okay, the first thing that you would have to say is, I'm offended. Well, then you're not guilty of that same thing yourself, are you? Or are you? See, that's the thing about forgetting another person's humanity. No matter how despicable they may be, you still have to remember they're a human being like yourself, and like you, are capable of failing, misunderstanding, heading down a wrong path, maybe saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, or just having viewpoints that are contrary to your own. And just because somebody has a viewpoint contrary to your own doesn't mean you should get offended by it, even if it is an offensive thing. It doesn't change the fact that that doesn't really solve the problem. What are you doing actually that is causing you to actually solve the problem and propose the case that would offer up a better solution? I mean, just look at an example. You're going along in your day, you are just, you have all these plans for a great and wonderful day, and then all of a sudden, you see something on the news that offends you, and you get upset about it, and for the rest of the day, you're angry about this, and you're screaming about it, and you're having a fit about it. And then the question becomes, what exactly did you do about it that entire day? And the answer is nothing. But you know what? Your day got ruined because somebody else was able to offend you and take power over you. Now, I have to also state this, as somebody who used to be a preacher and who has a political science degree, I'm going to tell you right now that both religious figures and anybody who's really a public speaker and pretty much all politicians like to use your passions and your emotions against you to manipulate you towards a certain course of action. They know for a fact that if you get emotionally involved in the issue, you're more likely to do something than if you intellectually decide that the issue is a good one. They know very much how to appeal to your heartstrings, to grab, that should anger you, you should be offended. And then once they have you in that state of being offended, they can implant and lead you down a lot of different paths. And that's something that you have to be aware of, and have to be aware that people can take your passions and using reason can rule your passions. Okay? Passion rules reason, but people that stay reasonable while everybody else is passionate about something, that's when you can really guide them. The thing about it is, with being offended, is one of the great things of preventing yourself from being offended is simply realizing, well, gee, haven't I done something that offended somebody else? Yeah, sure you have. And I think that's one of the things that, like a lot of people I see, that they go, I'm offended at that, so I'm going to take action. What, dude? You haven't done anything offensive yourself? You haven't made somebody angry at you by your actions? I'm sorry, sooner or later you're going to do so. And you're going to say, well, but I was justified in getting them angry. Were you? This is the real problem that I have with people who get offended and get angry all the time. It's not so much that they waste their time, but they waste everybody else's time, and they don't really solve the problem. I've looked at a lot of political and religious cults over the years, and I don't see that any of them really accomplish too much except gaining control over others. And they usually use that by telling those other people to be offended by whatever it is they tell them to be offended by. When I was a preacher, I used to talk about, well, look what's going on in this world. They're attacking Christianity again. You should be very upset about this, and this is what we need to do. Back when I was a younger fundamentalist type preacher, I talk about abortion and, how we needed to, take political action or whatever. And the way to appeal to that was to appeal to the emotions. There's a good rational argument against abortion, and I've even made that argument on a couple of occasions to myself and to other people. But I also realize that a lot of what happens in abortion, both sides, is people yanking it. Well, they're taking away a woman's rights to choose, or they're killing babies. These are both very emotional, designed to be offensive arguments. But nobody really seems to really ask the question rationally. And I think that's where the politicians and the religious figures actually want you. They want you mad, and they want you offended. And that is when they have control over you. Okay, and you need to remember that. People that can incite your passions, people that can cause you to be offended, are the ones that have power over you. And that's why being offended is not really a virtue. Really, when you respond to something that you dislike, I think probably the characteristics of being honorable and handling that situation honorably, really truly being convinced of the truth. And when you know the truth and you understand it, sometimes there's actually two options, but sometimes the first option is one you need to execute. Don't say anything. It's not the time or the place, and it won't do any good. The other option is to take a stand and speak the truth, even in the face of many obstacles. There is a time and place to do that, but I don't think being offended is the way to go about it. Carefully planning and understanding what your argument is, and then presenting that to others, is a far more effective way in the long run of actually solving the problem. That's kind of the big thing I have with being offended. I've looked at all these people getting offended over the years, in the last 30 years. I'm offended at this, I'm offended at that. And I still can't see where any of them actually solved the problem. It wasn't until somebody stopped being offended and just started to raise the argument and the position of what they needed to do that they began to change. So being offended doesn't really do anything, and it's not really a virtue. What you really need to focus on is focus your thoughts on the humanity of the other person. This is often very hard, especially when you consider the other person maybe as a bigot, or maybe they are just a religious fundamentalist that's giving you a hard time about the fact that you don't believe. I've had that a lot as an atheist. The issue for me at that point is not to be offended, but to ask them why they take issue with me, because often, 9 times out of 10, it's a misunderstanding, and the rest of the time, they just really haven't thought it through. Somebody told them to be offended, and that person has power over them, so they were offended. See, this is another way to recognize how to handle when people are offended, is you have to really take control of your own emotions so you don't get caught up in the offense and the anger yourself. Remember, you're just a human being. and you have your own failings, and you'll quickly forget your own anger when you remember that. You'll proceed towards that other person, even a person who maybe is a bigot, with a little bit of compassion, realizing that maybe they've just been led astray, or they have wrong information, or they've been indoctrinated as a child to believe that. That's not something to hate them for. It's to realize that as a human race, we tend to really continue to repeat the same mistakes. And we got to find a way to get out of that cycle. And I think as a human race, it's going to take us a while to do so. There are certain things that have been so embedded in us, and we have to overcome them. So I hope you've enjoyed this little lesson about being offended, and whether or not being offended is really the right way to go a right path. I don't think it is. I think it's much better to be calm. Remember the humanity of the person that you're dealing with, and understanding that if you do get offended, whoever is offending you has control over you. Do you want to be in control, or do you want to be controlled? Becomes a really good question when you're engaged in getting angry or offended. Well, Viking Duck, I'm not offended at you, but we'll find a way to get around it. I want to thank everybody for stopping by, and this has been Simple Life Philosophy, and I've been your host, Ed Raby. I hope that you continue to journey each day looking for a better way, a simple way to live that focuses you and is effective in getting to where you want. Now, I trust that you will like, comment, subscribe, share this video, do whatever you think is necessary. Every little bit helps grow the channel. And once again, thank you for stopping by, and I hope you have a great day.